Welcome, everybody. We are back with Indie Reads Aloud. This is so much fun, and having this gentleman that I'm about to introduce to you on the podcast is one of my great joys. He is an amazing writer. He writes incredible mystery and romance and suspense and just really cool stuff. This is Mark Love, and he is back with us again today. Thank you, Mark, for coming back.
Oh, it's always my pleasure, Diana. You and I have such fun doing these nights. And
Yeah.
and every time you say, okay, I'm not gonna have all right, come on back, and I'm like, okay,
No, I never say don't come back.
not yet.
No,
Not yet. We
my
always have too much fun.
my problem is I keep asking you to write more slowly so I can catch up. And you're not writing more slowly. You keep churning out 2 books a year. What is with you?
I'm trying to aim for one good book each year, and if I can, that's great. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
Well, that's the double-edged sword of doing a podcast like this, is that I get to meet so many amazingly talented authors, and then my TBR pile just gets wildly out of control. So
You're going to get
fun,
to the
but
point where you're going to have somebody that's going to be reading to you while you're sleeping so that, they
okay,
can.
that's a great idea, but here's the problem. When I fall asleep, I don't usually remember. Like, I don't remember any of my dreams, which means I have to go back because sometimes I fall asleep listening to other people's podcasts.
Okay.
And then I have to go back in my waking hours and listen to them again because I forgot what I didn't hear when I was asleep.
Well, I can assure you that your podcast would never put anybody to sleep. Okay?
Well,
We
thank
have
you.
way too many laughs and too much fun with these.
Well, my thing is that I grew up listening. That's part of why I wanted to do the storytelling podcast, is because I grew up being read to out loud at the library, in my home. My grandparents, we always listened to people read out loud. And as I grew into adulthood, it occurred to me that we don't do so much of this anymore. So that's
Yeah,
why
that's
I
a shame.
wanted to do it again. And because I'm still that 6-year-old who wants to be the first one on the carpet for story time at the library. And so this is my way of being indulgent.
Makes perfect sense to me.
Okay. For those of you who have not met Mark before, let me introduce you to him. Mark Love lived for many years in the metropolitan Detroit area where crime and corruption are always prevalent. As a former freelance reporter, Mark honed his writing skills covering features and hard news. He is the author of the Jamie Richmond mystery series, which includes Devious, Vanishing Act, Fleeing Beauty, and Stealing Haven. The short story, Don't Mess with the Gods, was written with, help me with her name,
Ellie Nina Castle.
Nina Kessel. She's in all the way in like Australia, right?
Yes, that's
Very
correct.
cool. And they wrote Don't Mess with the Gods, which was included in the Magic and Mystery, Magic and Mischief anthology. Mark also wrote the Jefferson Chain mystery series, including Y319 and Your Turn to Die, and the latest Shane mystery, The Wayward Path. Mark now resides in West Michigan, where he enjoys a wide variety of music and books and travel and cooking and the great outdoors. And his wife is very indulgent, and he has an awesome family. And and as you all just heard, when I listed his amazing writing credentials, I'm having a hard time keeping up.
I'm trying to slow down. I really would, but I can't get the ideas to slow down. They just keep
Yeah.
coming to me, or I'll see something and go, that sounds good. And
The,
and yes, you're very accurate. My wife is very tolerant and understand my craziness. And there'll be times when she's like, still alive? I haven't seen you in about 5 hours.
yeah.
But that's okay.
So tonight you're going to read from Vanishing Act, which
That's
is book 2 of the Jamie Richmond mystery series, right?
that's correct.
So just because, there it is. So
There's Vanishing Act right there.
just because I like to hear you tell stories, instead of reading the book synopsis today, I would really like it if you would tell me about the story and then read it.
Okay. It begins the day after Christmas, which is when Devious, the first book in the series, basically ends. And this introduces Jamie's lifelong very best friend, Linda, who makes her entrance, and that's going to be one of the first scenes that I read. Linda, unfortunately, becomes under the attention of a stalker. And as things progress during the winter, she also starts a little romance that Jamie is instrumental in setting her up with somebody and is surprised when it goes that way. But then the stalker situation kind of gets into play. And at one point, in fact, Linda actually does vanish. They have no idea where she's at. But Jamie, utilizing her experience as an investigative reporter and her awareness of things, she's able to kind of figure out who kidnapped her and where she's being held. Does her very best to come help her.
Her boyfriend Malone, who is a police officer, correct, I would think would help her do this, right?
Yes, and Malone is the romantic interest. He's a police, state police trooper. He's a sergeant that she meets in the first book. And she's still developing this romantic relationship with Malone. And so sometimes it's very smooth and sometimes there's some tension there because they're still getting to know each other a little bit.
Well, but that's what romance is all about, right?
Very true.
I am super excited to read this. I have not had a chance. Now, I got to tell folks listening, just in case they're wondering, even though these books are in a series, I have read them out of order. For instance, I have not yet read Vanishing Act. And I still genuinely love these books. I didn't feel lost. I didn't feel disconnected. So anybody who picks up book 2, don't feel like you're obligated to pick up book 1 first, but you're going to want to anyway.
That's one of the things with each of the stories that I write, because I do it with the 2 different series. I try and make each a standalone novel, so that even if you hadn't, as Diana said, even if you hadn't read the very first book in the series, it's not like you feel lost jumping in and reading the most recent one, because we do a good job between myself and the editors of making sure that there's clear identification of the characters that are involved and the relationship.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. That's what makes you such a joy to listen to as a storyteller, because I never feel disconnected or lost.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate
so how about you read to me? Would you read to me?
I'd be delighted to read to you.
When you are ready, please take the microphone and read aloud.
Very good. All right, so let's get started here. It was the day after Christmas when my cell phone rang. I flipped it open without even a glimpse at the screen. No refunds, no exchanges, I said. Jamie, where the hell are you? A sultry voice demanded. Linda, I'm standing here in your apartment building, freezing my cute little ass off, and your door is locked. You never, ever lock your door. When did you get back in town? 2 hours ago. Logan and I couldn't wait to see you. So where are you? I gave her directions to the new place. Linda was on her way. Someone far smarter than me once told us that if you're lucky, we'll get to have one true friend who will always be with us, no matter what's going on in our lives. They may not be in attendance each day, and there may be months when you don't speak or get to see each other face to face, but deep down, you know they will always be there for you, and you'll be there for them. Turns out I found my true friend when I was 6 years old. Linda and I met in the first grade, and we became inseparable. A teacher once remarked that we were twin daughters of different mothers. I honestly had no idea what she meant. It was years before I took it as a compliment. Linda and I bonded. We cried on each other's shoulders. We flirted with the same boys all through elementary, high school, and college. I was her maid of honor when she tied the knot, and the first person she called when she was getting divorced. We never bothered with the pinky swearing, the blood oath, or the spit in your palm before the handshake routine. We didn't need it. We just knew. As I ran from room to room doing a quick cleanup, I realized Linda and I had a lot of catching up. On my way past the bathroom, I grabbed a damp towel. In early October, Linda had taken a leave of absence from her job as a history teacher at the high school in Northville. Her mother, Gracie, had fallen and broken her hip. Years ago, Gracie moved to Raleigh, North Carolina, to get away from the Michigan winters. Knowing her mother would need assistance following her surgery, Linda hadn't blinked twice about taking the time off to be with her. The school agreed to her absence. She was due back at the blackboards with the first classes in January. I heard the thump of a car door and a great deal of noise. Opening the front door, I was nearly bowled over by Logan. His enthusiastic greeting can be overwhelming. Kneeling in the doorway, I wrapped my arms around him as he covered my faces with wet, sloppy kisses. Logan, baby, I've missed you. He didn't verbalize a response, but I could tell he was happy to see me. Logan's a golden retriever, the most well-behaved dog I've ever known. I rubbed his coat with a towel and then wiped his paws so he wouldn't track snow or mud through the house. Once I released him, he scurried off to investigate. Jamie, you look fantastic, Linda said as she swept me into her arms. We hugged for several minutes without saying another word. Good friends can do that. At length, we went into the kitchen to make some tea. There was so much to talk about, I didn't know where to start. On Christmas Eve, while Malone was at work, I dismantled my cherry kitchen set and brought it to the house from the apartment. There was no way I wanted to have our Christmas dinner while sitting at a card table on folding chairs. Linda got cozy, shedding her scarf and her winter coat, while I got the kettle boiling. I took a good look at her. As happens every so often, a flare of jealousy flittered across my mind. Couldn't help it. She's so damn gorgeous. Linda is about 5 feet, 5 inches tall, which is 2 inches shorter than me. But there's no mistaking the physical differences between us. Where I have a narrow body and very meager curves, Linda is blessed with both bava and boom. She's slender and curvaceous, a result of great genes, which makes her hourglass figure that much more incredible. Topping it off is a thick mane of curly, dark brown hair that rolls about her shoulders every time she turns her head. When the humidity is up, the curls just intensify. If she wasn't my best friend, I'd probably hate her strictly on principle. But it's Linda's face that can stop traffic, halt conversations in mid-word. Her features are the envy of fashion. A narrow, aquiline nose, sparkling baby blue eyes, and a Cupid's bow mouth complete the package. There is nearly always a hint of mischief on her face, as if she's in on a secret that if you're really lucky, she'll share with you. And her eyes can look right through you and touch you. Jamie, this is so unlike you. We talked 2 weeks ago. You never said anything about moving. What can I say? I suddenly had the urge to get out of the apartment. While the water was boiling, I gave her a quick tour of the house. Linda's eyes widened when she saw the size of the master suite and the marble fixtures in the bath. Logan padded along with us, sniffing at everything that caught his attention. When we returned to the kitchen, he sprawled under the table. I set out a bowl of water for him with an easy reach. Picking off my slippers, I began to rub my bare feet on his fur coat. It's heavenly. Linda waited until we had our mugs of tea and a plate of Christmas between us. Then she propped that lovely chin in the palm of her left hand, fixed those dazzling baby blues on me, and began the interrogation. I saw men's clothes hanging in that closet. There's a razor on the sink and 2 toothbrushes. And you've been dodging my questions long distance about a new romance. But one look at you is all I need. You've been getting laid a lot. So start talking. I felt the color rush to my face. Linda has always been direct. Not much to tell, I said, stalling for time. He was just some stud I picked up by the side of the road. He reminded me of Logan, so I couldn't resist. Logan's a great dog, but he sleeps on the floor, not with me. I'm not buying this line of shit, Jamie said with a gentle. Tell me about your mom. Linda sipped her tea and took a minuscule bite out of a cookie. Mom's fine. Her recovery is right on schedule. She insisted we fly out early this morning so I can get back to my normal life before school starts. I think she's got a boyfriend and wanted to get busy with him for New Year's Eve. Now stop trying to change the subject and tell me. She looked so serious I burst out laughing. Linda threw the rest of her cookie at me. It bounced off my shoulder and landed on the floor by Logan's nose. Before I could pick it up, he'd taken care of it. His name is Malone, I said when the laughter faded. Is that his first or last name? He only goes by Malone. Linda raised her eyebrows. He sounds mysterious. I like him already. Tell me more. Tell me everything. I want to hear every juicy morsel, especially the sex. All right, the second scene. Now it's a few weeks into the new year. Jamie and Linda are taking exercise classes to fight the winter doldrums. Linda has realized that someone is stalking her. The events of that Thursday night will be etched in my memory for as long as I live. Not only because of what happened, but because I've been replaying that scene over and over ever since, like some video recording stuck on a perpetual loop. Linda and I had gone to the gym, as was our custom. Earlier in the day, she found a childish Valentine's card tucked under the windshield wiper of her car. There was no signature, just a cartoon character offering up their heart. It could have been from anyone, or it could have been from her stalker. She started to throw it away, but remembered the warning from Malone. Using her gloves, she picked it up by the corner and dropped it into a plastic bag in her car. I was going to give it to Malone on the off chance there could be fingerprints on it. So she was a little unnerved when we went to work out. But the physical activity, the pounding music, and the noise of the other women grunting and groaning through the moves helped to improve her mood. We bundled up afterwards and headed for the car. The lot had been crowded when we arrived, so we ended up parking at the far end. Talking quietly, trudging through the clumps of snow and ice, neither one of us heard him. It's getting to the point where I just want to stay home, she said quietly. You can't hide, Linda. If you become a prisoner in your own home, then he wins. And you're much too strong a person to let that happen. She gave me a wan smile. I know, Jamie, it's just, hey, a gruff voice snapped at us from only a couple feet away. Linda let out a shriek of surprise. She lost her footing on the ice and crashed to the pavement. Looking over my shoulder, I saw a blocky shape hidden in the shadows beyond the reach of the overhead lights, gliding close to the back end of a parked car. He took a menacing step forward, one hand clutching something tightly and extending it toward us. Run! I screamed at Linda for all I was worth. Hey, he snapped again, still reaching for us. I took a step toward him and planted my left foot on one of the few dry patches of pavement. Then I swung my right foot as hard as I could, as if I were about to nail a 50-yard field goal to win the Super Bowl. Without realizing it, I braced for the impact. To this day, I'd swear I was aiming for his crotch, but I missed. Maybe the pavement wasn't dry after all, or maybe something Suddenly shifting my weight to make that kick caused me to lose balance. Or maybe subconsciously, I really couldn't kick a guy in the balls. Or maybe he sensed what was happening and he took a step back. I'll never really know. In my peripheral vision, I could see Linda scrambling to her feet, already racing toward her car, clicking the remote control to unlock the doors. My leg continued its arc, and just before making contact, my left foot shot out from underneath me. My right foot slammed into the bulky guy. I caught him square in the chest. With my body going horizontal, it must have looked like some kind of crazy ninja move. Whatever it was enough to take him off his feet. He went down with a thud. I couldn't be sure, but it looked like his head bounced off the pavement. I landed on my side and scrambled immediately to my feet. I was crouched in a fighting stand, anger and adrenaline churning in my gut. The guy let out a low groan. He made no move to get up. Suddenly, lights flared around us. Linda had managed to start her car and pull it into the aisle. She lay on the horn, a long, deep-throated wail that cut through the night. Few people who had been moving across the parking lot came running over. Illuminated by the headlights, I looked down at the attacker. He was an older man with a couple of days' worth of stubble across his face. His left hand was pressed against his chest, roughly in the spot in which I kicked. Slowly, he raised his right hand in my direction as our eyes locked. His voice made a throaty, rasping gasp as he spoke. He dropped her glove. Malone was not happy. The look on his face told me everything I needed to know. I'd stepped over some kind of line. Jamie, I told you I'd take care of this. You can't be taking matters into your own hands. His voice was tense. There was none of the tenderness, the humor, or the calm that I usually associated with Malone. But I can't leave it alone. We're talking about my best friend. I know who we're talking about, but you can't go running around like some renegade in a movie trying to see that justice is done. This whole thing could have blown up in your face. But no buts, Jamie. He leaned forward, looming over me. You put an innocent old man in the hospital, attacking him like that. And the only thing he had done was to follow Linda out to her car because she dropped her glove. But Malone, he threw up his hands in disgust. You just don't get it. You have this notion in your head that you're right, and to hell with everyone else. I couldn't remember Malone ever swearing before. He couldn't look at me. Right now, I wasn't so sure I could stand it if he did. I'm sorry, Malone. My voice was little more than a whisper. Sorry might not be enough, Jamie. You could have killed that guy. And what if he'd really been after Linda? What if he was armed? Instead of just getting in your car, calling for help, you could have been putting yourself in harm's way. I had come to the state police post to talk to Malone. It was hours after the incident, yet he was still pissed. I knew he wouldn't show it to anyone else at work, but I didn't want to let any more time go by. So I leaned against the desk in the small office he shared with the other duty sergeants, waiting for my punishment. Is he still in the hospital? Malone asked quietly. I nodded. It's just a precaution. Apparently he has a history of heart problems. Swear to God, Malone, I really thought he was the guy who'd been stalking Linda. It wasn't until he went down that I realized what was happening. Of course, Linda was terrified when he came towards us. Malone came over and leaned against the desk beside me. So when a stranger approaches you in the early evening, your first reaction is to kick the guy in the chest. Actually, I was aiming a little lower, but I slipped on the ice. I really am sorry, Malone. I told the hospital that I'll pay for whatever charges there are for the poor guy. What happened to the precautions I told you both to take? Staying together, being observant of your surroundings, understanding that it's all right to call for help. What about all that? I kept my eyes on the floor. There was no way I could look at him. It was all I could do to shrug my shoulders. No more heroic moves, Jamie. I'll get you each a canister of pepper spray. But until this thing is settled, I expect you to behave. Keep your cell phone in your hand. We'll do whatever you say, Malone. I really did think she was in trouble. He shook his head slowly. Then he drew a deep breath, draped an arm around my shoulders, and pulled me close. Remind me never to sneak up on you, Jay. I promise never to kick you like. All right, this next scene, best way to describe it, this is a little surprise for Malone. In addition to their normal exercise classes, Jamie and Linda discover that one of their instructors also gives private lessons in pole dancing. While the intent is to use muscles differently, can also have a positive impact on getting the attention of the partner in their lives. I was sitting on the rocker when Malone came home that night. He stood in the entrance from the kitchen, looking at me for a moment without saying a word. I set my book down on the table and, with what I hoped was a fluid movement, slid from the rocker to my feet. Good evening, I said in my best attempt at a sultry voice. Malone drew me close for a kiss. You're all dolled up, Jamie. Were you out on the town? I stepped back and took his hand. Then I did a slow pirouette so he could get the full effect of my outfit. I was wearing what Linda called my slave girl sandals, the ones with the high heels and the straps that laced up above the ankles. My legs were bare. Wearing a jet black wraparound skirt that was a good 4 inches short of my knees. A white silk blouse that had a plunging neckline was very daring for me, and large hoop earrings. Now standing at arm's length from Malone, I arched an eyebrow at him in what I hoped was a sexy look. Do you like my outfit? I asked coyly. Most definitely. Without another word, I led him back into the kitchen and to the stairwell. I kept him close enough so he was getting a whiff of my perfume, something called Enchanted that he'd given me for Christmas. I hoped its name was well deserved. In the basement, I guided him to a folding chair and an old table. On the table were a wine glass and a chilled bottle of sparkling grape juice left over from the holidays. I pushed Malone gently down on the chair and instructed him to open the bottle. With a quizzical look on his face, Malone decided to play along. While he was fiddling with the cork, I went over to the corner where I'd set up a portable stereo. I switched it on along with 2 floor lamps that I had arranged on either side of the support pole. With the bright lights shining and the music queuing up, I turned toward Malone. I couldn't look at his face for fear that he might start laughing. As soon as the first song started, I began to dance, swaying to the beat, using the tricks Madeline taught us just a few hours before. Halfway through the first song, I managed to glance at Malone. His eyes were wide with delight as I took 3 quick steps and grabbed the pole, swinging around it. Things progressed quickly from there. I felt daring, sexy, and idolized. Knowing it was inevitable I'd end up on the floor, I had placed an old yoga mat near the pole in the hopes that it would cushion my landing. Somehow, I maintained enough control to slide gracefully down the pole and land gently on the mat. And, just as Madeline taught me, I managed to get up sexy as the song was ending. As the next song started, I moved closer to Malone. Standing beyond his reach, my body was moving in time with the music, swaying and twisting. Remembering some of the more advanced moves Madeline had done, I let myself go. Still moving with the music, I dared to step closer, Gazing into Malone's eyes gave me the confidence to keep going. I ran my hands up my body, fluffing out my hair, shaking everything I had. There was no way I could keep going if I tried to talk, so I didn't. My fingers slid down my sides and came to the little belt that held my skirt in place. Undoing it, I extended one end to Malone. He pinched the end between his thumb and forefinger, and then I slowly turned away from him, letting the wraparound skirt unwrap. I continued to dance to the music, had my back against the pole now, with my arms reaching above my head as the song faded. My eyes closed for a moment, and suddenly I felt Malone's hands on me. I was in the air, in his arms, as my body shuddered. He was carrying me up the stairs as if I weighed no more than a feather. "Do you like my dance?" I whispered. That was the sexiest thing I had ever seen. Well, I wasn't done. We were moving through the kitchen now, and he paused to give me a long, hot, and always do an encore performance later, Jay. I couldn't sit still any longer. Let's just say this is my version of a standing ovation. And that's the end of the scene.
Well done. Well
Thank you.
done.
Thank
Oh my
you.
gosh. I love reading you, and I love hearing you read even more. It's always so wonderful for me to hear how an author interprets their own work,
I
because it sets up the story for when I sit down with the book in my hands. I then hear the cadence of your voice as you read.
and I think that's so vital to the stories themselves. And I'm like you, I love to hear somebody else reading their stories or scenes from their stories, and you get so caught up in it, and the inflections can change and the pacing can change a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, wait, don't rush, keep it
Yeah.
going.
Yeah.
But oh my gosh, it's such a blast to do. And
It
I have to admit, I peeked a couple of times at some of these scenes at your expressions. And I mentioned that the lesson was pole dancing and your eyes went like this. I'm like, gotcha.
Yeah, you always do get me when I least expect it. So here's something that I'd like to ask you about, because we don't do a lot of talk on this program about craft because it's primarily about storytelling. But I want to continue with this idea of reading aloud and how vital that is to connecting with readers. How difficult was it for you to learn that nuance of reading aloud for an audience? Did you have bumps along the way? Was it something you grew up with as a child and so it's a natural thing for you? How does that work?
I
And then I guess part two to that is, how do you decide which pieces to read aloud?
all right. Part one, um, I'm a dinosaur, so I don't really remember that much about my childhood as far as my parents reading it. I know my mom probably did. But when I became a father, that was something. So books are essential to life, just like music.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
they're so important to me. And I've always been a book junkie. And so with both of my sons, the time they were this big or a little bigger, um, I was always reading to them. And my oldest, Travis, would love it. He'd come up, I'd come home from work. First thing he wanted to do, climb up in my lap and let's read a book.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
we were, together we were reading them. And that was just so much a part of it. And I love doing that. And it's just a kick to me to be able to sit down with an audience and read. When I first started reading some of my own work was when I started doing some workshops. And I was fortunate enough a few years back to start to facilitate one at an organization. And so I was encouraging other people to write, but also to bring in some of the work that they were doing so they
Mhm.
could get some feedback from others as far as, wow, I really like this, or oh, this didn't sound right, or whatever. But we focused on being very constructive criticism. And of course, everybody would turn to me because I've had some books that have been published. I'm very fortunate with that. And they wanted to hear something from one of my books or
Sure.
what I was currently working on. So when I would do that, I'm kind of like, I'm trying to stay focused here, but my eyes keep sneaking up, like I want to see what the reactions are from the people that are around the table.
Yeah.
And that's something that I've really come to enjoy. And when you got a captive audience, it's fun to be able to do it like that, share that little bits of the story with them. And as far as part two about the scenes,
Mm-hmm.
with my books, and when I first started doing these with you, I would just start from the beginning of the story and I
Right.
would start to read. And I thought, that's dull. Anybody can do that, I want to do something different.
Yeah.
So I wanted to try and pick 3 different scenes that would fit into the timing, that would show a little bit about the different characters. So like with this one, there's the introduction of Linda and her
Right.
relationship with Jamie, which is so vital and carries through the rest of the series. And then I had that little action scene where they think it's the stalker coming up and
Right.
Jamie comes to her defense and not. And then I had to have a little romance scene for
Well,
Jamie and
because
Malone.
critical to these stories, this
Absolutely,
series especially, is that romance element.
that is so much a part of it. And somebody says to me, you're really Malone. You're just making this stuff up, Jamie. I'm like, okay, if that gets you through the night, whatever.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, they're all me, but it's just the idea. But I wanted to share, these different aspects because they're all part of the big story itself. They're
Sure.
all part of the
Well, and
vanishing.
I love listening to you read because you give us that story arc. It's not just chapter 1 that I get hooked on, although that is where I get hooked, but when you read for us, you give us an arc so that we get seriously invested, and your books move closer to the top of our TBR because we get seriously invested.
I like
So
the sound of that. So
I am really delighted that you keep coming back to read for me.
I have so much fun when you and I get together, and these are just delightful. And I really enjoy the opportunity to share these scenes with the audience and, see, maybe I get somebody's interest and they want to check it out. I will tell you this Jamie character, she's the very first fictional character that I created. And it's just been a delight to see her grow as a character and the
Sure.
different things that I get her into or that she gets me to write about that she does. Somebody says, do you have a muse? And I said, yeah, it's this little redhead that sits like right here.
Uh-huh.
And if she's not involved in the story, she gets impatient, even if it's not her story, because she's also appeared in 2 of the Shane mysteries
Okay.
as well.
So
And
you can't just set her aside and say, I'll come back and visit with you later. She insinuates herself into everything.
yes, and it's worked out so well in both of those books. And I've actually had some comments from people that have read both series that it's like, why do you, can't you leave them alone? Keep them separate? I'm like, no, it's like 2
No,
little kids fighting in the sandbox. They both want to be together in the story.
that's
And
very
it's
cool.
great. It
That's
just
very
works
cool.
out.
You and I could sit and talk for hours.
I have no doubt in my mind.
But I'm running out of time and I want to be respectful of our listeners' time. So I invite you to come back again and read for us again.
It would be my pleasure.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming tonight. And again, slow down, would you please, so I can catch up?
I'll try. I'll try it.
Okay.
I'll give it some thought. So,
Okay. Awesome. As long as you
right.
think about it, that's all I ask.
All right. Thank you
Thank you
so much,
so
Diane.
much, Mark. It's just so delightful.
My pleasure.
Thank you.